Hey everyone, welcome back to FFGLive. We're here today with John Schaefer, who is the manager of the miniatures department, and we're here to talk about Star Wars Legion, and specifically the Clone Wars core set. That's exactly what we're dealing with here. I see a lot of things on the table here, crafty stuff that I'm not accustomed to, and that our audience may also not be accustomed to, even if they're Legion players. If they don't play other miniatures games, they may not have played with these bad boys before.
Yeah, exactly.
What can you tell me about this? What's going on here?
Cool. So these are plastic frames. They're made out of hard plastic, and that material has some advantages for sure. The primary one I would say is that you can get a higher level of detail with the parts, and they're also more rigid. So like things like lightsabers, stuff like that, when they're cast in softer plastic, sometimes will bend when they're in the packaging. You can always like straighten them out with a little bit of hot water, but the rigidity of the hard plastic and the detail is why a lot of miniatures gamers prefer it as a material.
Sure.
For all this stuff. So it does come with some I guess different methods for assembly in particular, and I think that there are definitely some vital tools that are going to help you out when you are working with plastic frames in particular. So we'll go over those. We're going to kind of cover some assembly of some battle droids because they're very small, have like a lot of parts, and I can give you some tips and tricks on assembling those guys and getting them on the tabletop relatively quickly. We'll cover some options for General Grievous and some droidicas, some other stuff like that, and just field some questions from the chat as we go through it. Yeah. So I guess first we'll start off with tools and discussion of that. So all these frames come on a part, all these parts come on a frame that need to be removed. So to do that, you have a pair of flush cut clippers here. So on these clippers you have one side that's got a sharp side here, and then on the flip side you've got a flat side that will help out when you are clipping up against the actual parts themselves. Sure. So when you look at these individual parts, you'll see that they the connection parts here, this is called the gate. This is where the plastic goes into the actual part itself. It kind of tapers to a finer point, and that's where you actually want to remove the parts, is right up against those. So you would actually take the flush side of the clippers, put it up against the part, and just clip it like that.
And where'd you get these clippers? Is that
you get these at hobby stores? Hardware stores have them. They're pretty common as far as tools go, and you can find them relatively inexpensively. Okay,
but your hobby game store could also.
Yeah, for sure. Just make sure that when you buy them that they have a flat side like that, because if they taper to a blade point on both sides, you're going to leave a lot of material when you go to remove the parts from the frame, and it's going to make cleanup a little bit more cumbersome.
Sure.
So yeah, you just go through and you'll just remove a part here like this. I clip it from both sides, set that part aside. So one thing that I typically like to use is an ice cube tray for organization of all my parts.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, so it's kind of a handy veteran trick. So if I'm assembling a lot of guys all at once, it's a lot faster to just go through and clip all the parts off. I think one thing to note is that when you are working with these frames is that they have a part number on each one, and we've numbered each individual pose of each miniature with an according letter prefix. So like the parts for Battle Droid Leader is going to be parts A1 through A10. The next battle droid would be parts B1 through like B8, something like that.
Sure, so basically a single miniature has a letter. Yeah. And you grab all the pieces with that letter, and that's
exactly
right.
You need. Yeah, and in the rule sheets and the Learn to Play, we kind of go over all of those individual parts and kind of identify all those for you. The one exception to that is the bark speeder that comes in the core set. That does not actually come on a frame. All those parts are clipped off, so we kind of refer to those parts in specific terms as opposed to letters and numbers.
Sure. Are the pieces for a single miniature, say, are they typically all on one frame, or might they be scattered across?
They're usually all on one frame. The droidicas actually, because they have a wheel mode variant and also a standard variant, they've got some extra parts there too. So some of those parts are spread across two frames. This one, for example, are the arm options for the standing droidicas. Sure. With the twin blaster cannons and stuff on there.
All right. Well, who's this I see lurking in the wings? Alex Davey.
I know.
Welcome to the stream, Alex.
Here he is.
Oh, hi, guys.
Come out the side hatch.
Coming to help us assemble some Clone Wars core set?
Heck yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Alex has got a lot of experience working with plastic frames.
I have put a fair number of fancy, puffy Imperial dudes together. Yeah. From the old Warhammer days.
Nice. So it's we're just kind of going over the general basics right now. Just the fact that frames have parts on them. You use clippers to remove the parts from those. I got my sweet tip on using an ice cube tray. You, of course, don't have to do that. But I do recommend like some sort of like plate or something like that, because a lot of these parts are very, very small. It's very easy for you to lose them, especially on like gray carpet or something like that.
Which the entire office is.
Yeah. So there's oftentimes us down with cell phones trying to like cast a shadow.
The whole minis department was like looking for a piece once.
Oh yeah.
In the lead up to the Clone Wars.
We were all
trying to get
recruited.
That painted.
Yeah. It was an emergency to find those bits. Yeah, but we found them all.
We did.
Through sheer effort.
We did. We should use that ice cube
I do have a quick question from the chat here. Duck Squash says, do you suggest rinsing the sprues beforehand, or is it not necessary?
I don't find it to be necessary, honestly. They typically don't have the same sort of mold release that you'll find on other plastics in general. So we'll get into glue and adhesives for assembling this stuff here in a second, but I would say for the most part, I have never washed a sprue or any plastic parts that come from hard plastic. Have you ever done that before?
No, I don't think it's necessary. I think there's, no harm in it, certainly, if you're concerned about mold release, but it's, I think it's a step you can save. Like especially having seen these sprues, they're really clean, they're dry. I don't think that they're going to be an impediment to priming if you don't wash them.
I think the only thing that you might introduce is maybe if you were, eating something greasy, you have like oil on your fingers, maybe handling something but even then, I really don't think it's going to be much of a problem. I think it'll probably be all right.
No, we've primed up a few batches of these, and it's been no issue.
Yeah, I've never run into a snag with that. So let's talk about probably your best secret weapon in assembling things on frames, and that is plastic glue. So so far up to this point, we've used super glue to assemble everything in the past. Because of the plastic that we're using, which is like a PVC plastic, is a softer material, and that's something that everybody has readily available to them, and is pretty straightforward in how you use it. Plastic glue, however, has a couple primary advantages. One, it doesn't bond to your skin, so when you're dealing with these teeny tiny little parts, you're not going to glue your fingers together, or your fingers to the part, or whatever. So it's
your fingers to the part, to your face, to the passing bus.
Oh yeah, I've definitely glued my arms to a table before. It's lots of horror stories there. But at any rate, so plastic glue is great in that regard. The second thing that's really, really cool for it is it takes a little while to dry, so it will be tacky initially. It'll kind of hold the parts together, but it takes a while to dry, and you can kind of reposition the parts. So what's happening with plastic glue is it's actually taking the two surfaces together, and through chemical magic, it's melting them together to create a stronger join and actually glue the parts together. So it has a lot of advantages, I think. So the type that I really like to use is a bottle like this. You can get these at most craft stores. If you get the version that is designed for model masters, it actually comes with a metal tube on the top of it, which I find is a little bit better. It doesn't get clogged up. This is the other version of it that comes out. Usually find these in like where the model kits are sold. It's pretty much the standard for assembling like model cars and things like that.
Sure.
So having a little precision applicator like this is really going to help out when we're dealing with these little teeny tiny parts, for sure. So yeah, go to your local craft store or hobby shop or game store. They'll probably all carry this stuff.
Yeah, I just learned of this stuff like minutes ago, and it's pretty miraculous.
Yeah, it's magic.
It will really make your assembly a lot simpler and a lot easier and a lot less painless when dealing with these little teeny tiny parts. Cool. So we're going to go through, the last little bit that you'll also probably want to use is it's just a standard kind of X-Acto blade. And you're going to use this primarily for, once you've clipped a part off of the frame, you sometimes will have a little bit of leftover material from the frame, and you want to be able to kind of clean that.
Yeah.
And also, sometimes you will have like little slight mold lines here that you want to kind of remove just so that the overall finish of your miniature is going to be a little bit better. So the technique that I typically use and that a lot of miniature guys use is they'll take the blade, they'll face it away from themselves like this to kind of get away from their fingers, and then you're going to put your thumb against the piece and then kind of scrape backwards towards yourself. And I think that becomes controllable and a little bit safer. So you always want to be very mindful of your fingers while you're doing this sort of thing when working with sharp objects, obviously, and just kind of like move around the miniature and clean off any of those little unsightly parts. So some of these things fit together very, very snugly. They're very precise and precision fit, so you want to make sure to kind of test fit them before you kind of advance and make sure that the parts fit together well. If they're a little off, then trim away the excess material with a hobby knife and then proceed from there. So I'm going to do a little bit of that here on the bottom. On the underside of the pelvis, there's a connection point there that I like to remove, and then I like to scrape off the mold lines on either side of the torso, like that. So each battle droid comes in a number of parts. This torso is the first one of those. And all of the individual poses, as I mentioned before, have a kind of a letter and number system used to identify all the parts. So I've kind of gone through already and clipped off all of the individual poses here into this ice cube tray.
Sure. And
kind of put them aside so I can just kind of go through them systematically. So as I mentioned before, the glue takes a little while to dry, so you're kind of incentivized to do this kind of assembly line style. So you're going to like glue all the legs to the torsos and all the feet to the bases, and then you move on to the next guy. And then glue the legs to the torsos, feet to the bases, move on to the next guy. Assemble all the heads at once, for example, on the battle droids.
Sure.
Because they're all the same, they're interchangeable. You might as well just kind of get all those guys lined up and ready to go as you do that. So that's pretty much how I go about it. Do you have any general tips on your procedure when you're going through all this stuff?
Yeah, I think the assembly line process is definitely where you want to end up. But if you've never built a sprue before, or if you've never built the battle droids before, and you want to sort of see what the posing possibilities are, I think it's worthwhile to take your time on one or two droids before getting the line process rolling.
Yeah, sure.
Just to see how it all fits together, see how you want to pose them, and sort of really understand the kit. And then you automate it once you kind of have a grasp of what you want the final result to be. That'll give you an idea of how things connect, and it'll take you a little longer for those first couple minis because you're waiting for it to dry and you're kind of thinking about it, but it'll give you a better appreciation of how it all comes together in the end. So other than that, I'd say the assembly line method is going to be faster, it's going to be easier. You can divvy up all the different poses you want into the ice cube trays, and it's going to cut down on your overall assembly time immensely.
Yeah, totally. And that actually segues into a question we had here. James Heath asks, how customizable are the different miniatures, or are they going to be as posed as the Empire and Rebellion?
They're actually quite a bit more diverse in their poses. So for the most part, like all the arms are set up in a way to kind of match and go together. And so I would recommend you kind of stick with the same arm poses, because if you kind of mix and match and swap in other arms, you might run into some alignment issues, because a lot of the arms connect at the shoulders and then also at the wrists near the weapon. So I would keep those together. The legs in particular are also set up in a particular way for specific poses, but they're all kind of, you can swap them in and out. Like you can, if you, again, you kind of want to test fit them ahead of time just to try to achieve some different poses, but you can get a lot of variety in there. When we get to Grievous in particular, you can see like there are a lot of different ways you can build that guy.
Well, the other thing I'll say in terms of posability is that all of the Rebel and Empire miniatures have fitted joints, so they go in one single way.
Yeah.
And you can take a knife or a file or whatever, or clippers, and change that into like a ball joint or a smooth peg. But these are all ball joints. So even if you keep the same assembly that you find in the diagrams, you use all the right parts and everything, you can move these arms up and down, you can move the heads left and right, you can reposition the legs. So even if you don't do any sort of custom part swapping or anything like that, the variety of poses that you can get is much greater than in the Rebel and Imperial kits.
Sure, just by virtue of having those infinite
the ball and socket joints. And that's something we're going to be doing much more of in the future. Just more rotation, more posability, because even just twisting a torso and like turning a head, you get a very different feel. And since all these droids are all identical, the only differential you're going to get is how they're positioned anyway. So you can do a lot with just a few little ball joint changes. You can really get a diverse array, or you can assemble them all in like marching format where they all look exactly the same. There's a lot of stuff you can do with battle droids in particular.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Cool. All right, so let's go into like my process for assembling battle droids in particular. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some parts here from my bin to make a guy. So these are all the parts that we're going to need to make this fellow right here. So you've got a backpack, you've got a torso, you've got a set of legs and a set of arms all in here. So I'm going to go through as I did before. I'm going to kind of trim some of these excess parts off. I'm going to kind of angle this away from my fingers. Be careful.
And one thing to note about this mold line removal is this is a really good method. It requires a little bit of precision and dexterity and practice. If you're not confident in your X-Acto knife skills, you're looking for a different method. They make mold line removers that are not quite as sharp, and you can also use microfiles. So there are different tools available. I tend to use a file because I've cut my hands many times with X-Acto knives.
Sure.
But if you do master this method, it's a great one. But just so that you're aware, a set of files is pretty cheap and easy to pick up. And certain companies make specific mold line removers that'll do that exact same thing where you pull.
Yeah, they have kind of like a right angled edge as opposed to like a very
it's like the
razor edge.
Just like the safety version.
Yeah, exactly.
John's a wild man though. He lives on the edge.
I am. I've just been doing it for so long. It's what I'm comfortable with. But yeah, that is a very good point. There are definitely some options if you're not very comfortable working with a hobby knife like this. So we've got these legs kind of popped off, and this is the guy that's actually kind of kneeled down down below. So I'm going to take a little bit of plastic glue here. I'm going to put a little dab inside each of these wells, and you'll notice that on the interior of the leg, you have kind of a round joint, and then it's flat. And then those things are, that is pretty much aligned with the post on the pelvis as well to get the proper leg positioning for these guys, but you can interchange the parts, so feel free to kind of experiment with different poses, different leg combinations. But right out the gate, I would recommend for your first unit to just kind of follow the basic pose suggestions. You'll probably have a little bit less of a snag that'll come up as you go through. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of plastic glue here to a leg, and you're going to push that onto the pelvis here, kind of see like that.
That's so cool that it just like kind of instantly.
Yeah, it'll just
like
kind
that, or just sort of like.
It has like a little bit of a.
on.
Yeah, that's why I like this particular brand quite a bit, because it will just kind of hold immediately, and then you can just kind of move on to the next part as you go.
Yeah.
So this leg then just is angled up like that. So you can see that now that we've kind of attached those two legs, the pose here actually allows it to sit flat on a base, and that's going to be my next step, is I'm going to kind of adjust this thing, and you can see that, now that I've glued this on there, whoops, pushed it a little bit too hard. There we go.
The great thing about plastic glue is that you can just pop it right back on, though.
Yeah.
Totally. It hasn't fully cured yet.
And so you put it or you put it onto the base before you're finished completely assembling the
Yeah, for sure.
And is that just so that you can kind of set it down and it can sort of stand up?
I like to put it on the base because it just allows you to just move on to the next guy, and he just has a stable place. So I've kind of done that here with this guy. He's going to be the ones that I'm going to work on assembling here later. You just want to put a little dab on the bottom of the feet. And this one in particular, I just like to put it on this one foot, so I don't put a lot of extra glue on the bottom of the leg.
Sure.
Kind of center it over top of the base as well as you can there, and then you just want to kind of set this guy aside to dry. So you want to hold it for, 2-3 seconds, something like that. It'll hold like that. Set this guy down, move on to the next guy.
Yeah, and the other nice thing about assembling any part that's going to go together then go onto another part, you kind of want to get that all done simultaneously, because when that glue does set, it's an incredibly strong bond. It actually melts the plastic together. So if you were to do that without attaching it to the base, you might have the feet misaligned. You might not have the sort of pose that you want. So it's a pretty meticulous process, but if you do it in the right order, you have a ton of flexibility and control. Because you can mess with that pose for another 5 or so minutes probably before.
If I decided, like I'm kind of looking at him, he's kind of leaning a little bit off to the side, so I can actually take this guy and I can kind of adjust him and tweak him just a little bit. Move this a little bit, just kind of jostle him just ever so slightly, just to get the right pose that I like, and then when I'm happy, it's going to hold well enough that it can just stand by itself.
Cool. That's
Move on
very
to the next.
cool.
Cool. So the next part is the arms, and the arms are probably the trickiest part because you've got a 3-point connection there. You've got a connection that happens at the shoulders, and then those arms also come down and connect at the wrist here. So you'll notice on each of the blaster rifles, you've got a hand that's attached, and on that blaster rifle, on that hand, you've got a kind of a wrist bracket right in here. So that is the part that you're going to use to attach to this arm that has at the end, right here at the wrist, that part is going to connect right in there. So I'm going to kind of trim this a little bit just to get the part so it fits kind of well, kind of cutting away from myself again. And check this guy, he looks pretty good.
So the people asking about the exact date for this new set. So we don't have an exact date set yet, but we're looking at a bit later in September. So mid to late September for the Clone Wars core set.
Yeah, oh, and I guess another thing that we should probably mention at this point is that before that release, we're actually compiling a lot of these instructions together into like an assembly PDF that we're going to host on our website. It's very thorough. It goes through all of the hard plastic miniatures here. It goes over all these steps that I'll be discussing today and has a little bit more specificity. So you can refer to either this video or you can take a look at this guide. It should help you out when you get your course in your hands.
Yeah, especially if you're new to this style of assembly.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so anyway, so we're going back to these arm assemblies here. So the next thing I want to do is I want to put a little dab of this plastic glue in between those two wrist brackets, right here on the end. So a little bit there. And then I want to take this arm and I want to kind of slot it in between the two wrist brackets there. You can see it kind of fits flat right at that point. And then you want to take a look and see how it's already holding that arm like that. You want to kind of adjust this arm ever so slightly so you can imagine that the shoulders are going to be in between there.
Right, because we're going to have to basically push that V of the shoulders.
Yeah, over top of the shoulder brackets.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of set it down and adjust this guy ever so slightly. But I'm going to let that sit for a little while because I want that glue to hold. Because as I'm going through and adjusting and tweaking the arms to go over the shoulders, I don't want that arm to come separate from the wrist on the other end.
Sure. So how long are you thinking that you would let that?
I would probably let that sit, I don't know, 30, 40 seconds, something like that. Not a super long time.
Right. You don't want it to be fully melted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So because I'm doing this kind of assembly line style, I'm just going to set that guy off to the side. I'm going to go through, I'm going to grab another set of these arms here.
Because we kind of have these two droids that we're building right now.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to go through these two guys.
And then after these guys, we are going to get to like Grievous and the Droideka.
Yeah, exactly.
And take a look at the Bark Speeder as well, I think.
Yep. I think right now what I'm going to do is I'll also show you've got the heads. And the heads come in two parts, mostly so we can still keep all of the cool detail that comes on the back of those. And then on each of these parts, you've got a little channel here, a very small channel here, and then you've got a little peg on the other side. So those two things align to let you assemble the head. So that comes in two parts. I'm going to put a little bit of the plastic glue here onto that part.
So there's still almost a degree of peg and hole to this.
Oh yeah, for sure. We go to great lengths to help align all the parts whenever there's anything uncertain. But that system is also pretty flexible in that it will allow you to kind of interchange some parts as well.
Absolutely.
So you're going to kind of align those guys, the back of the head to the front, so it kind of meets up flush at the very top of it. And I'm just going to set that guy down to dry a little bit longer.
Look at that little head.
Look at that guy. All right, so now we've got this arm assembly here. I want to then go into my mini here that I have. I'm gonna put it on this guy. A little dab of the plastic glue on either side, on the shoulder joints.
And so just to clarify then, so you are mixing it up, right?
I'm just showing the fact that you can kind of interchange. So all the torsos are the same, all the arms are kind of interchangeable. But because this guy's still drying a little bit longer, what I don't want to do is when I go in to put the arms on him, he's going to pop off the base. So I'm choosing a guy that is a little bit drier than the other one.
For sure.
He's kind of cured a little bit longer. So you want to pick this guy up here by the end of the barrel, and you want to kind of slot it over top. I like to set that guy down. So you want to slot that part over top and then just kind of push and hold for a second, so it kind of joins. Now you want to move this guy around to the other side, and you want to move this arm up, so then it goes over top of the other post. Like, oops, hold that too. And then you want to kind of push it in from both sides to get it to align properly. Cool. So now you've got, the arm, it's connected down here at the wrist, as it was before, because we let it dry for a little bit longer, so it held. And then we're using that plastic glue to kind of let us reposition that thing and get those arms on there just right.
Nice.
So now, again, we're just going to let that set for a little while, about 20, 30 seconds, something like that. Move on to the next part as we go.
And so because of kind of the way that the miniature is constructed, we could, if we wanted to, like, lift those arms, he could be, like, holding his arms above his head.
Oh, yeah,
or
totally.
Like, pointing down to the ground.
Yeah, so you get a lot of posability with that, and then also the way that the heads are set up, you can kind of turn the heads to the side, either direction. I would recommend that before you put the heads on, though, you attach the backpack, which is the next thing that I'm going to do now.
Sure.
So you look on the back of the backpack here, you'll see that the backpack and the torso have both got some slots associated with them. So you've got this kind of large rectangular thing that nestles in between, the recesses in between there. And then you've got a flat little peg, or like a little, I guess, like a raised bar there that will go in between there. So again, just drop a little bit of this glue here on the back,
We have Seizure Salad is asking, so plastic glue for the model, super glue to the base, question mark. So you did plastic glue on both, right?
I did,
So
yeah,
for
on
the
both,
base
because the base and the miniature are both made out of hard plastic.
Right.
Now, when it comes to PVC parts, like the clones in this particular set, or the clear pegs that attach, those are made of a different type of plastic that will not work with the plastic cement. So you have to use a super glue with that.
And that's the plastic glue. When you said plastic cement, it's the plastic glue.
Exactly,
same thing?
yeah,
Okay.
same term. They refer to it as plastic cement here, but the generic term is plastic glue. That's a little bit easier, just to kind of avoid some confusion.
Perfect.
Cool. So I'm going to take this guy here. I'm going to attach the backpack.
People asking for the release date for the Clone Wars box. It's coming. Late September is where we're looking at. So stay tuned. No exact date at this point.
Cool. All right, so we got the backpack on there. It rests kind of flush. You'll see that it's kind of aligned up with the top, and you're just using that kind of slot and peg system there to get everything aligned properly. Now I think this head is probably dried long enough that we can pick this guy up and work with this guy. A little dab of plastic glue in there, inside the little recess on the underside of the head, and then we can put that on top of this neck post here. And you can kind of pose that in whatever direction. If you want to have him like kind of sighting down the weapon like that, maybe he's got a coy angle to his head, something fun.
A rakish angle.
Yeah, a rakish angle. He could be looking off to the side, surveying for a next target, whatever you want to do. You get a little bit of flexibility there in how you assemble him.
Roger, roger.
Cool, so that guy is done. That is one battle droid down.
Perfect.
Yeah, pretty sweet.
I have one tip for people who may not have the steady hands of an industry veteran, or master craftsman
Yes,
such as
yep.
yourself. We're obviously assembling these in sort of a camera staging area, but one thing I think helps a lot if you have a slight tremor, if you're a little bit having some difficulty with assembling these things, a high table that you can brace your forearms against.
Sure.
Gives you a ton of control. This is a good tip for painting too.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if you are struggling with like trying to get those bits together, because I have an essential tremor, sometimes my hands are a little shaky. This is a really great way to get some stability and precision out of things.
Yeah, that's a really great tip. I'm the same
great
way.
tip.
So I would definitely.
If you're John, you can just crouch over,
just like
crevasse,
free,
Yeah.
standing in
And
the
do
air.
it.
I will not say this is the most comfortable angle. That's right. I typically will be like this. I'm very up close, but for the sake of showing these these tips, you have to kind of lean over.
Sacrificing for the audience.
Sacrificing for the audience, the things I do. Yeah. All right, cool. So we've covered some battle droid action there. Most everything else in there is identical. We go into some specifics about the missile launcher and the unit leader, because they've got some kind of unique parts. The unit leader's got some binoculars that you can have up or down. The missile launcher's got a viewfinder that you want to kind of align with the head. So in this document, we kind of go over some specifics there. I think for the sake of just kind of moving on and covering more stuff in the stream, I'm going to move on to the next bit, which is going to be droidicas.
Awesome. Those early boys.
You old droidicas. And I would say when it comes to the droidicas, there are certainly some steps involved that you need to do in the proper order to get the parts to go together well. And I think that probably the most complicated part is the arms themselves. That's a little tricky because they've got a lot of points of connection, but if you kind of go about it the right way, it's pretty formulaic and not too difficult. So unlike all the battle droids that have kind of a single number and combination, the battle droids will have some parts, and I'm not sure if the camera can pick this up very well, but this part here that I've already clipped off, which is in it's right here, this carapace part, is A17 and also C17. That just means that part is usable for either one. Yeah, it's interchangeable. It's identical for both of those. So what you start off with is you want to assemble the two halves of the torso first. Let me grab all these parts here and get them out on the camera. Actually, do you want to assemble something?
Yeah,
I got some parts.
something.
Yeah,
Sure.
I got extra tools and stuff over there. You can just go ahead and grab it.
Why not?
What do
Shall
you
I
wanna-
build a droidica along with you?
Yeah, sure, whatever you like.
So let's see.
Do
You're
you want to
working
build
from
like
the
a ball form, maybe?
Sure,
And
I'll
you
try
could build
to
the
I'll try to
standing
work
one,
on the
or vice
ball
versa.
form.
Okay, sure. That sounds good. So the miniatures also do come in, as mentioned, both the regular wheel mode form and also the standard form. And those parts are pretty much, the whole process is very similar. I would say that the standard droidica's got the more complicated arm configuration and how you assemble it. But yeah, everything else is pretty much the same as far as you go about it. So you've got a torso. This thing comes in two halves. You connect those two parts here. You want to make sure they're kind of properly aligned up on the tops. And then what I will often do is after with these kind of two half assemblies, I like to go back through and kind of scrape over top of the seam, just to kind of clean it up a little bit.
Sure.
And kind of clean that up. You could also just use a file over top of that to clean it. So we've got this main torso part. And the next bit that we want to attach is going to be the legs to the lower half. So you've got a lower half here and an upper half. These two parts go together, but don't glue those together yet because you need to sandwich in between them the forward legs. So you want to do that part first. Apply a little bit of glue here to the channel.
So that's kind of what you're talking about with the order, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's pretty clear in the instructions, but just to go over it again, we just don't want somebody to get to the point where they've glued some parts together and then realize that, oh no, I made a terrible error. So you want to glue that part in there first, and then next you want to apply a little bit of plastic glue here to the tops, over here, like this.
Seizure Salad again is asking if there's a C-3PO head on the sprues.
No, there is not.
You'll have to get
but
that
there is
stuff.
there's a
patch that.
C-3PO coming out.
Yeah, that's very
Crash
true.
Escape Pod.
This is an achievable goal.
Yes,
can be done.
You could do this thing.
Can be done. Okay, so we've got the top and the bottom half here. You've got a post and hole system, like a lot of our parts that kind of align. So sandwich those two guys together. Those are your forward legs. Then around on the back side, you've got a little channel right here, which corresponds with the rear leg here. So you can kind of drop this guy in like this. Slot this fella in here. And then that is your lower half.
Nice.
Kind of set that down so you make sure that it rests flat. And then at this point, because we want to kind of let some things dry, you can go ahead and glue this lower half to the actual base. You just want to make sure to align the front legs with one of these channels so that your movement tool will work properly and when he moves forward. So I'm going to flip this fella over and apply a little bit of plastic glue to each one of these feet at the bottom. You may find that you want to, after you've actually attached this just for a better join, you might want to apply just a little bit more plastic glue onto it. So I'm going to get this guy kind of aligned over top of the center of the base so the vision arc on the front is kind of in the right spot. And then just for a little bit more hold, I'm just going to add just a little dab of plastic glue to each of these feet. You don't want to put a big giant glob on there, but yeah, just a tad. Let that little part dry over there. So let me see where my next part is for the torso. Let me see, I think you've got the frames over there
I think
too.
so.
We're going to be sharing some parts here for a second. Here we go. So the next part here is this section.
Sure.
Right here, which is kind
That's
of like
kind of like that back bit. Right?
Yeah, it connects the upper torso to the lower torso.
Yeah. That's backbone, I guess.
So again, gonna kind of take our clippers here, clip these parts off, flush up against the part.
Do we happen to have a learn to play handy?
A learn to play.
Yeah, I think we have the box here.
Yeah, we have the box here. I'll get it.
I think we got to learn to play.
grab
I'm gonna set to work on one of the ball form guys.
Okay.
Here, let's-
Yeah, I think all your parts are the B's.
Yes.
On here, so you'll need all these guys. Cool. Okay, so on this part here, you've got a top and a bottom. The bottom is identifiable by, you've got this extra little kind of bump right here on the top. And then also the peg that goes into the bottom is not complete. It kind of has like a little notch cut out of it, whereas this one on the top is just flat. So I'm going to take this fella here. So this is the chest part of the upper torso, and then it has these two parts here that connect to the rear carapace. So this thing needs to be kind of go forward like that and connect like that. And then this whole part is going to then slot into that part there to kind of create the upper torso. So again, apply a little plastic glue into these parts.
So Glucose 98 is asking what plastic glue is that. So we can't get into the specific brands, but it's called plastic glue, right? Or plastic cement. Perhaps?
Yeah, plastic cement is what they call it in the packaging. It's a very identifiable bottle like this. You can see it at if you just go to a hobby store.
Yeah.
Any place that sells crafts and you look in the model section, you're bound to find this stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty common.
Perfect.
Cool. All right, so we've kind of inserted that lower torso section in there and how that connects. That's right. And then on the back, you'll see that we've got two little posts here that connect with the back carapace right here. And inside of that carapace, you've got two recessed areas that correspond with those two pegs. So I'm going to put a dab of glue on each one of these.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and glue that fella down so you can see this part glues into there. Kind of press and hold it for a little bit.
Look at that.
And it will kind of lock in there.
Crabok is asking, have any of you guys at FFG done any fun mods to your Clone Wars stuff yet? Like I put my Grievous's cape on a B1 leader droid.
Oh, nice. The most fun thing that I've done is I posed a Grievous with a 1 lightsaber arm and then a split 2 lightsaber arm and with the cape, with sort of a different pose. Because there's so much you can do with Grievous, even just from the base kit.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that we'll see a lot of really fun conversions.
I want to see him
battle
holding
damage.
lightsabers in his feet. You
Sure,
know?
yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, that would be cool.
A little nod to the Tartakovsky cartoon from back in the day. So yeah, no, there's a ton of fun stuff that you can do for sure.
So I realized when I was putting that lower torso on there, I actually had it flipped around. So again, that's kind of the benefit of the plastic glue.
Yep.
Yeah.
You pop that guy out before when you notice your mistakes.
Seeing that in
So
action.
it hasn't set yet.
No.
You have quite a lot of working time with
Wow.
plastic glue, which is what makes it such a boon to this assembly. If that had been super glue, you'd be in for some breaking and scraping.
Yeah.
It's not what you want.
For sure. Okay, so that is kind of the sub-assembly for the upper half. Minus, we've got a couple little panels that go on the back.
All right, give me one.
Yeah, no problem.
Second here.
No worries.
Let's see if there are any questions in here.
There you are.
Cool, thanks.
Todd Henderson, are there plans to have a version of Kenobi in his Jedi robes instead of his armor? It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
We've done multiple versions of other characters. So.
Yeah, I think that we if we have the time, we would love to be able to do all the iconic depictions of every character.
Absolutely.
But part of it is that we just want to spend more time introducing more content to the game, more variety for units for people to field, and just kind of really kind of capture everybody's little favorite characters, as quickly as we can.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about waiting on alternate versions of the characters is that we can introduce interesting new mechanics, interesting new points levels, give you a way to play somebody that you like in a different way. For instance, there may be a much more expensive Leia in the future who's more powerful, or there might be, we've got 2 different values of Luke. We have Return of the Jedi Luke coming out, and that just gives you a different opportunity to play around with those iconic characters. But we want to space them out.
Right, and it must be kind of a difficult choice, right? When you're saying like basically by doing a new version of Vader, it's almost like, well, that could have been like Anakin, for instance, right?
Well, people that's the kind of funny thing. To some extent, that's true. In the case of Luke and Vader, that just sort of those got sort of added to our schedule as like a bonus.
Oh,
for,
okay.
So,
Bonus.
Luke and I put in some extra hours on those. Those are not exactly replacing anything that you might have gotten otherwise. But yeah, in general, there's only a certain amount of bandwidth that designers have in order to do a quality product. So you do have to be pretty careful about how you line up the release schedule and what goes in the place of what. But Luke and Vader are so iconic.
Yeah.
And so recognizable and faction definitional that it was a really cool chance for us to revisit those because we've learned a lot over the course of a couple years of Legion design at this point. And it was cool to bring in some of the newer mechanics to some of these older characters.
Absolutely.
Cool. So I have kind of finished adding these extra little back plates to the back of the lower torso there. And I think at this point now I'm ready to attach the lower torso to the upper torso. So I'm going to apply a little glue here to this channel at the back. I've gone through and I test fitted it first, and then I've kind of made sure that it's all going to be aligned properly. So this guy will slot into there. This little channel, like so.
It's coming together.
Cool. So that is kind of the lion's share of the basic torso part. We are forgetting his head, so we got to get that part on there as well. Let's see. Here's the part here. And much like all these other parts, I will note that this part here, it might be a little confusing as to what part is the actual plastic part and what is the extra flashing there. So you'll see that it tapers down here one time, and then it has an extra post, and then it tapers down to the gate as well. You want to cut it right there to allow a little bit of an extra post to glue that part onto the...
So the gate is always basically just that very thinnest part closest to the rest of the frame.
It tapers down to the most narrow point on the frame itself. So I'm going to clip all these little parts off here. Cool. So then we've got this extra little tab here that you can see on the top. Apply a little glue to this. And then this part goes inside of the carapace. And then a little channel right there at the top. Kind of press and hold that part in there. And it doesn't take very long to actually grab a hold of it. Cool. And there we go. So that is him done except for the arms.
Right.
And the arms, in my opinion, are kind of the trickiest part, as I mentioned before.
Sure.
So we're going with this this pose here. I think just for clarity, I'm going to go ahead and just clip all the parts off of this frame, so just so you can see the process. We're going to assemble the arms with the A configuration. So that is going to involve, let me see, this A 15 and 13.
Can either of you speak to having, use this ice cube tray to sort out your pieces? And then making ice cubes in that tray, how did the drink taste?
Artificial.
Yeah. Very plasticky.
Very, very plasticky. Cool.
Although, I gotta say, you can drop a Han Solo mini into an ice cube and get instant carbonate.
Oh,
Yeah.
man, that's
Yeah.
a good one. That is a good one.
Maybe add a little...
You need some food
little
coloring
brown
or
food
something.
coloring or
Yeah, to
something.
get the color right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do they make brown food coloring? It seems like a color they might avoid.
Alex, could you tell me on the part numbers there, just
Yeah.
so I get these straight? They're sequential, right? So it's A13 and A12 to make the one blaster on one side?
Let's see here. Yes, so A12 would be the right-hand blaster with the hose.
Cool.
A13 would be the left-hand blaster with the hose. Then it goes 14, 15.
Cool.
And it's A10 and 11 in between.
I think that we were pretty deliberate in ordering these things in such a way that they're kind of sequential for each part. Just making sure.
So we got another question here from Kravok. Can you guys say what other announced expansions will also be coming on a sprue?
Other announced expansions.
Oh, announced expansions? Oh, yeah. No, I understand that question. Pretty much everything in Wave 7 and beyond.
Sure. So that is
So that
Dooku
would
and
be
Rex, right?
not Dooku and Rex.
Okay.
I believe Dooku and Rex are both PVC,
Okay.
the soft plastic.
Yep.
And those are, I guess it's kind of hard to organize this because we have a different development process necessarily than when stuff gets announced.
Right.
But Dooku and Rex are still PVC. But
then we have
phase 2
clone
clones are hard plastic.
And the super battle droids as well.
The super battle droids, all the separatist stuff will be hard plastic except for Dooku. Dooku will be this one
Sure. He's the special one.
special example of the last remnants of PVC. But then the idea is that moving forward, the entire line will be on frames. And then we will eventually visit older SKUs as well.
Yeah. But then like the tanks as well.
The tanks are all hard plastic, including the crew, including any figures that come in there and can be placed in the turrets.
That's the AAT and the TX-130.
So basically, Rex and Dooku were designed simultaneously with the core set and with the first sort of push of Clone Wars stuff, and then the next sort of internal wave was tanks. A couple of secret Rebel and Imperial things we haven't announced yet, and the trooper, phase 2 troopers and stuff like that. So.
Sure. So the
trooper packs, the upgrade
expansions
are sort of a mix. I believe that because
there are droids in there, B1 battle
Yeah, the
droids.
B1s are obviously on frames. However, the clones are still the Rebels, and the Imperial are still PVC.
Okay.
Yeah, because those were, I believe, designed sort of simultaneously with the Clone Wars stuff. So we were sort of forced to learn this new process so that we could do justice to these droid units. And they look so great, we're just going to move the whole line over to that.
Yeah. I mean, they do look awesome. Let's see, we got another question. So how in depth are you guys planning to go into the Clone Wars units? There are so many, such as commandos, arcs, assassins, staff droids, all that kind of stuff. Like, there's a ton to draw on, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can kind of look at how many units have been released for the Rebels and Imperials, and we're going to keep releasing stuff for the Rebels and Imperials, and we want all the factions to kind of be at parity at one point, or another. So, yeah, I think we're going to dive pretty deep into all that stuff.
Sure.
think that, especially the things that you see in the animated series, I think there are a lot of units in there that we really want to do.
Yeah.
There's definitely some stuff from the films that we want to do, some other sources. Yeah, so we're pretty excited about all the different options.
And there's new Star Wars coming out all the time, right?
Yeah,
Which
for
just
sure.
gives more and more options for what you can draw from.
Yeah, Mandalorian coming up, some
I'm
other
so
stuff.
excited.
Oh, man. Yep. I'm very excited to see that stuff as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. So back to Droideka arms.
Yeah.
So
What's going on?
these guys, you've got each arm is made up of 3 parts. So you've got, aside from the shoulder part, which has got kind of like a forked kind of section with 2 little nubs in between, and then you've got a central arm section here. So you want to take this central arm section, you'll notice that this got some round indentations here, and then this part here has got, the little round ball joints on either side. So I like to just insert that part into the center part of the arm here like this. So it's like that. And then you can see it kind of moves in there. And then I want to put just a dab of glue into this recess right here. And I'll put a dab right in there. And then I want to fold this part back in here so it locks in. And I want to get that part in there first, because after that, each of these arms, each side of the blaster cannon goes in here, and then it has a cable that hooks around to the back right here into these two little holes. So we've kind of made it a little bit easier on you in that on the left and right side of each one of these, it has a different type of peg. So you can see here that this has got kind of like a double slot system here, and then this one's got a large flat channel. So you can make sure to kind of keep them separated, because the center part of the arm also has the same sort of corresponding peg, how it's set up. So we're going to take this guy here, which is the one side of the blaster cannon, and we're going to test fit it to make sure that it goes around to the correct side here. So it comes around here to the back, and then you can kind of see that how it will fold around to the back there.
Sure.
So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to place a bit of glue here on the interior of the arm, on that center part, and then also I'm going to put a little bit of glue onto each one of these parts here on the back. And then I'm going to slot this part onto here, kind of push that part onto there, and then come around to the back side and then just pull this cable around. Whoops, hold on one second, let me get that lined in there just right. Okay, and then pull this cable around here, and the arm that's on the interior, the cable should align with the bottom hole. So you just want to slot that in so it lines up on top there.
Sure.
And then flip this guy around on the other side, put a dab of glue on this part, and then take the other half, which I'm going to use my system here to align, and then we're going to slot this part on there first, hold and pinch that, and then while holding those parts, whoops, there we go. You want to take this part and then just slot that part into there, under the top, so it'll line there. And then this is nice too, because with the plastic glue you can just kind of use your finger or a little paper towel. If there's any excess glue around the outside, you can kind of wipe that away. You don't really want to let it pool too much, because if there's too much plastic glue on a part, it might actually start to kind of eat away a little bit at it.
Sure.
So yeah, try to remove any sort of excess that you have there.
Just a dab will do you.
Just a dab will do you. So that kind of shows the assembly for one of the arms. We're just going to repeat the same process over here on the flip side.
Is this kind of like I'm just looking at this arm and how crazy the detail is on it. Is this something that would even be possible in soft plastic? Or
No,
it
not to
wouldn't.
this degree.
No,
definitely
and
not.
And the other challenge of soft plastic is any long, thin part gets wobbly.
Yeah.
As anyone who has seen the lightsabers on Luke and Vader can attest to. But these puppies,
Yeah, I mean, look at it.
nice
Look how straight they are.
and straight.
Yeah, like her in
and
the
that
camera.
applies to all of these
See here.
fiddly little cannons, all these long attenuated legs.
Yeah.
We just couldn't have done these at the same level of quality. They would have not been movie accurate. They would have had to be chunkier.
Yeah.
They would have been easier to assemble, but I don't think they would have looked nearly as good.
Sure,
In
for sure.
the long run. So this is one of those things where we just had to sort of evolve technology to match the source material. And I think that investment has really paid off, because I really, really, really like the way the Separatists turned out.
Yeah.
And it's something that we had done with the vehicles already, because we knew that sort of crispness is going to give you a superior vehicle look, but from a programming and development software standpoint, it is actually a completely different process to do smooth parts in hard plastic
Sure.
than it is to do vehicles.
Interesting.
Flat planes, you can do different software to create something like an ATSD or X-Wing ships or Armada stuff. We've been doing that for years.
Sure.
But this is actually our first foray into more organic shapes in hard plastic. So that's
Sure.
actually a really interesting, different process.
Yeah.
And so,
Interesting.
yeah, we invested in a lot of new tools for the Clone Wars.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
It looks like you got that. pretty
Yeah,
much.
arms completed. All right, last little bit. So this whole arm assembly attaches to the chest. You've got a little recess right in here. You want to apply some glue, and that part is going to glue onto this little part right here. You've got kind of like a little raised part right there. So after this kind of dries a little bit, go through and do it. I'm just going to go ahead and do it now just for the sake of expediency.
Yeah. A question, have you guys ever thought of working on a sort of small team or heroes only format for smaller and quicker battles?
This is my answer to that. That's all I can say.
Yeah, sounds fun.
Wait, sorry, do that one more time. What's your answer? Perfect.
Yes.
No comment.
No comment, but
Cool.
stay tuned.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. So we've got that little guy locked in there. I pushed it down. That is a complete droideka there.
Wow, look at
He's
that
got his
guy.
buddy over here. Look. This kind of shows like a little bit of the different arm options, like how they're kind of angled in different ways,
Yeah,
up and down.
kind of point them a lot
Yeah, a
differently.
little
Yeah.
adjusted, different fashion. Cool. So those are droidekas done. Alex is working on the ball system. So
Yeah.
that one is very similar how it goes together. Again, the arm assembly is less complicated, but everything else kind of goes together in the same way. You kind of got the center chest. You've got a back carapace, all those other things. So I don't think we necessarily need to go into that in particular.
The one bit of advice that I would give for assembling the ball form droidekas is that you want to do the legs, middle section, and arms before you put on the top piece.
Okay.
That's the only thing. You don't want to be stuck trying to, and you want to make sure that everything is still kind of tacky.
Because once you've put on that top piece, you've kind of like closed off access to a lot of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the ball form droideka actually fits together in a pretty specific way. And one of the pitfalls of that particular assembly is that you can, if you wait for things to harden, if you don't sort of do it all at once, you can fail to give yourself adequate room to like make the ball. So that would be my only tip.
For sure.
Make sure that you assemble one at least all the way through before you try to assembly line it, so that you can understand how it actually fits together.
Good tip.
Awesome.
Okay, so
Is it Grievous time?
Grievous time, I think.
Grievous
Yeah.
time.
So Grievous has got a lot of options. You can assemble them in a myriad of different forms.
Yeah.
So the kind of the most defining characteristics are either you want to go with single or split arms. So this example here shows kind of a split arm configuration on one side and then a solid arm on the other. And then this version has his cloak attached, which is kind of my personal preference. And then he's got the two solid lightsabers. You will find that if you're going to use the cloak configuration, you are a little bit restricted in the arm pose.
Sure.
And I'll kind of go over the specifics of how you can kind of navigate that and get those parts on there, so you won't all of a sudden find that your arms don't fit on there properly.
Yeah.
And how you go through and do it. So we're going to assemble him in contrast to these two. Let me see, which version
All
should
four
we do?
lightsabers.
All four lightsabers seems
Yeah,
pretty
man.
sweet. Maybe do all four lightsabers and cloak. We're gonna shoot the moon.
That's
We're
kind
gonna
of
go
like
for it.
a hack, right?
Top
That's
level.
not.
Sort of. It's,
The cloak with four lightsabers requires just a little bit of wiggling, but
Okay.
it's
All right.
it's not you're not going to be cutting pieces up or using an excessive amount of green stuff or anything like that. You just have to be careful with the pose.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, and for people that don't know, green stuff, that's what Alex just referred
yeah.
to. It's like a two-part putty. We know this stuff because we've been working with it forever. But it's a two-part putty that you use to fill in gaps. And it is, it's pretty much the standard on how miniatures used to be made before the digital revolution, moving things into digital sculpting. But yeah, it's you can get it from most hobby stores. You can see some tutorials online on how to use it. It's a handy tool for filling in gaps, but I find that you don't really need to use it, maybe with the exception of like there's some real slight areas on Grievous's cloak that you might want to use some gap filler for. But I oftentimes just use a thin super glue over top of the seam to try to fill that in. So if you just get a nice thin kind of super glue, and if you have like a slight seam in between the two parts of the cloak, you can just apply a little bit of that and kind of smooth it out with the tip of a hobby knife, and it'll kind of fill in the gap pretty well.
You can use a little extra plastic glue in a file too.
Yeah.
Kind of like blend over that.
Yeah, totally.
But just it depends on how big the gap is. For little gaps, I think it's pretty easy to fill.
I find it's pretty slight. I mean, this is the gap we're kind of talking about right here. You've got the rear of the cloak and the top part of it, and just how those parts fold together. It's kind of like rests right in the base of a cloth fold anyway, so I don't think it's really that much of a big deal. But that's different ways that you can go ahead and fill those kind of gaps.
And speaking of the digital revolution, IML 13 is asking what 3D software we're using, not us, but the sculpting department uses for the organic/hard edge sculpts.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different software that people utilize. There is for hard plastic in particular, there's a product called Freeform that a lot of people use. In particular, that kind of helps you prepare a lot of the files for production. We use ZBrush, we use Blender sometimes. Like, there's a lot of different 3D modeling software that you can use. And I think that, the sculptors, they can certainly speak on it a lot better than I can.
Right.
But just in my discussions with those guys about that stuff, because I'm kind of interested in learning all that stuff myself, those are typically the software that those guys use.
And I believe Freeform is the latest addition to our arsenal.
Yeah, that's the one that really helps
ZBrush is
out.
what we've been doing for many years, or one of the things we've been doing for many years. But Freeform is kind of what let us tackle.
Yeah, and it's without getting into too many specifics, like the hard plastic in particular, undercuts are a thing that you can't really do very well with that. And an undercut is essentially, if you imagine like the two halves of a mold coming apart, you have to make sure that there is not any sort of plastic that goes underneath the mold that would allow it to snag and fall freely from the thing.
Sure.
So that means that you have to kind of arrange, and that's oftentimes hard plastic miniatures come in a lot more parts because they can't allow any of those undercuts underneath them. You have to kind of cut them into parts so that mold can come apart relatively easily. So it's you can certainly look up some tutorials online if you want to learn more about all that stuff. But right now we're going to assemble this robot overlord.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got, first place you want to start is you got his 2 feet. Try to keep them separate so you can see as you look at on the sprue that you've got the toes kind of pointed down towards the bottom. This is his left foot, this is his right foot. So I like to keep those bits separate. You want to put the flush cutters kind of like up against the side here to kind of remove these parts. That's his left.
And how can you differentiate between the left and the right?
It's the parts are indicated on the frame itself.
Sure.
That's one way you can do it. But they're also just oriented in this way. The left one's on the left side and the right one's on the right side. And I just kind of set them down, left and right sides.
Perfect.
Just to keep track of it. Cool. So we've got these two. And they're all, very, very similar. I think there's just maybe a slight angle to those things that fit against the legs that just allow it to fit just a little bit cleaner. And then these are his 2 legs here on the top. So I'm just going to clip these little bits off. And then there's a small little post on the bottom, so don't clip that little part off on the bottom of his foot. You can see that little post here. That's going to go into these foot parts. So, and then you'll see here, just much like the battle droids, that he has a round cavity here that attaches to the pelvis. But unlike the battle droids, it does not have a flat section on the bottom of it, which allows you a little bit more freedom in posing and adjusting the legs slightly. So if you want to try to get the angles a little bit differently, you can kind of see that his legs are kind of slightly different on either one of these two. How they're set up.
I'm just going to hold this guy because I haven't seen this one.
Oh, I put that guy together for our tutorial just to show a different variety.
Wow.
And how you can assemble him. But he's got
cool.
a lot of different parts.
Man, Grievous is sweet.
He is really cool.
That's real sweet.
He is very good in the game too. He's very strong.
Slicing and dicing.
Slicing and dicing. You got to watch out for that command card that lets him attack everybody within range.
Oh yeah.
That one has gotten me a few times.
Trained in Jedi arts by Count Dooku.
That's true.
Trained in your
Very
Jedi
true.
arts.
Okay, so we've got these 2 legs here. A little bit of glue here on the base part.
I hear you heard that spinning was a good trick, so that's how we.
Yeah.
That was rumored to be pretty solid as tricks go.
All right, so a little bit of glue here on the feet. Attach those parts. So that's our left and our right leg there. And then we've got a torso, which comes in 2 halves.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to remove these parts here.
So you would wait then, you want to kind of attach the body to the legs before you glue anything to the base.
Yeah.
You don't have to do another kind of.
Yeah, exactly. I think you want to get the legs kind of attached to the pelvis area and the whole torso, and then you're going to kind of apply some glue to the feet, and then just align those things to get them centered over top of the base where you really want them to go.
Sure.
So with this one in particular, it's kind of hard to get your clippers down into this recess part, so you're going to have a little bit of material here that you're going to have to remove.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Awesome.
Be kind of careful here.
Seraph Painting says, I was able to use all 4 lightsabers and the cloak. Thank you for making these models so flexible.
Yeah, of course. I think the one thing, and we'll get to it here in a second, but when it comes to the lightsabers, the 4 lightsabers and the cloak, I think you're going to run into a little bit of a tight fit. He's got these shoulder pads that go on the top.
Yeah, his little.
And when they're underneath the cloak, you can hardly even see them anyway. So if you want more flexibility in that arm positioning, you might want to leave those shoulder pads off.
Yep. It's not going to make a big difference to the final model, and especially with a lot of the scenes that you see Grievous in, you can't even really tell that they're under there.
Right. Yeah.
So that's up to you. If you want to have them peeking out, that's possible. It's a little easy to do without them. But as you can see, this is granted a 2 lightsaber version, but you can get that kind of like shoulder pad peeking out effect if you want.
These ones fit underneath. It's just the four-armed configuration is just so much larger at the shoulder. It kind of splits right there.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's a little bit harder to get in there.
It is snug.
Cool. So a little bit of glue on either of these leg interiors. This part here.
Would either of you want to have 4 arms?
Yeah, why not?
What if it means being a soulless cyborg?
I'll probably pass.
Yeah, I think that's the deal breaker.
Okay.
Do I get an entire droid army at my beck and call?
Sure, why
Is
not?
that part of the deal? Now I gotta think
It's
about
kind
it.
of getting sweeter now.
Now I gotta think about it.
What if you were trained in his Jedi
Deal gets
arts?
better all the
Oh
time.
my.
Do I have to be a murderous cyborg though? Can I just be?
No, but soulless is non-negotiable.
No, that's not negotiable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, so we've kind of attached both those legs here, and I've kind of just loosely angled them so they'll rest flat, but I want to test it on the base and kind of adjust and tweak these legs. So I can make sure to kind of get them just properly aligned in here. And there's a couple different planes of the feet that you can use to rest on the base depending on the angle that you want to go, but I kind of like it somewhere like that. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to apply a little glue to the bottom of each of these feet. And get these guys attached. Again, you'll notice that, like, depending on the legs, you'll kind of like, and how you push them down, it will kind of camp the torso to the left or the right slightly. So it kind of depends on what you, which direction you really want them to go. But I want them to kind of be going just straight forward, just lightsabers out.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy. So I'm not going to do anything too creative with that.
Yeah.
Cool. So you'll see here that his feet are kind of resting. I chose to kind of put it up on the front part of his foot here on the side, and then this side is resting kind of flat. So he's kind of like stepping up and kind of walking forward. If I wanted to, I could angle that foot a little bit more forward and anchor the bottom half of his foot right down there along the base, but I think this is the kind of angle that I want to go for.
Sure.
Cool. So again, going to let that guy set for a little while, and we can move on to the assembly of the arms and the cape and the head. So I'll remove the head next. And just get that guy drying here. So again, using our clippers. And if I were doing this miniature for myself, I'd probably spend a bit of time to clean a lot of the mold lines off, but I'm just kind of going through.
Yeah.
It's up to you if you want to go to that extra level of detail for your finish. All right, so the head itself has got two halves. You've got a front faceplate here, and then you've got a rear section here, and there is a slot and tab system again for those. You'll see that the for the head itself, we've got the fins on the back are a little bit longer on one half than the other. The ones that are longer point down towards the bottom, towards his chin. So you want to use that half. So a little bit of glue here on the inside. Push these two bits together, kind of aligning that tab. And there we have a Grievous head.
Yeah.
You can see that.
Yep.
So I'm going to set that aside for later.
Little Grievous head.
And then the forearm configuration is made up of, let me see if I got all the parts here. Yep, so you've got these main arms here, and then you've got the more narrow ones on either side. So we're going to choose those guys. If you were doing him without his cloak, you could put on the shoulder pad parts, but I'm going to leave them off just for ease of assembly. These are the shoulder pads up here. When you go to assemble those and attach those to the arm, they taper down to a narrow point on one end that actually faces forward towards the front of the miniature, the front of his torso. The other bit that's kind of unique, if you're not assembling with the cloak, he has a collar here that goes around his neck portion that goes on there as well, which we should also put on here shortly. All right, so I'm going to clip off all these arms.
Sure.
And kind of show you how the arm assembly goes.
How difficult would it be to like detach the hands and then reattach them with magnets so that they could spin?
Well, let's take a peek here.
I think it's possible. I think you might have to bulk up the wrist joint.
I'll tell you what you'd want to do. You'd want a very small ball magnet on the forearm, kind of poking out a little bit in rounded form. And you'd want a little pin vise micro drill to carve the little socket for that magnet.
Yeah.
And then I think you would file down the hand and put in a tiny little cylindrical magnet on the hand.
Sure.
And then you could paint everything, and we're talking rare earth magnets too, the really strong stuff.
Right.
Then you could paint everything, and you would have a ball joint.
Yeah.
Hand.
Like spin them around.
And at that point, they do some 360s.
Wow.
That sounds like a fun little project.
Give me some ideas. Okay, so we've removed the cloak bits, his arm bits, and his neck piece. And I think that is all the parts that we'll need for this particular configuration. Okay, so the neck has got to fit in kind of like a specific spot, so I am going to spend a little bit of time to clean that part. Just going to kind of scrape away at that a little bit, clean that fella up a little. So when it comes to the neck, you want to make sure that it is leaning forward. So it's got an angle to it here. You want to make sure that this part is the forward part that faces towards the front of his torso.
Right, because he's kind of got that like.
He's got a bit of a
hunch
a
going.
bit of a hunch.
Yeah.
Cool. So and that just slots right here into the top part. So that is your finished version there of his neck. And then if you didn't assemble him with the cloak, then you would put the collar then over top of that. But we are going to put the cloak together, so we're going to put that on there. Speaking of which, again, this is a part that kind of fits tightly together. So I'm going to trim this little part here, which is the join.
That little nubbin.
That little nubbin where we clipped it from the frame. Kind of scrape that clean.
I love that we've got like kind of the quilted almost interior. Of
Yeah,
the
I love that.
Super cool.
Yeah, when I painted the version for the corset, I left this separate because it made painting that a lot easier. But that did require that I had to leave his head off. But I also painted that separate too, just because it's a little bit easier.
Sure.
So I just attached that to the end of a paintbrush with a little bit of light super glue there. And then I painted the head separately and then painted the whole interior of the cloak and then glued it all together at the end. So that is something you might want to consider if you are a little nervous about getting in there in those most recessed areas. You might want to think about some sub-assemblies for painting. I usually find that, I try to assemble as much as possible, just because it's really kind of fiddly to glue painted parts together at the end. Yeah, you might want to do that.
Another good option for the cloak is to get that kind of depth with a wash effect if you don't want to pick it out with a brush.
Yeah.
It sort of just depends on like what level you're going for. Obviously, John was painting for the photography of the corset. He wanted to get basically the highest level possible, but there's a lot of great things that you can do with simple washes. The battle droids look pretty amazing with just a base, a wash, and like a dry brush.
Yeah, I've gotten really good results.
Pretty
Just
damn
gone through.
impressive.
So I'm going to apply a little bit of plastic glue there to the face, the joining face there, and kind of align these guys, push them together. So you want to make sure that, especially here on the edges, right here, that these things are kind of aligned. If they're a little askew, you're going to have like kind of a noticeable join there that you want to kind of fill in. So we're going to push those two guys together, and I got a little bit of excess glue here on the top, so I'm just going to kind of wipe that away with my finger, kind of remove some of that excess there on the top. We can go back in and kind of scrape that that joint a little bit cleaner later on after the glue dries. But yeah, for now, that's good.
All right.
So that is the cloak there we've got. And then these arms, you've got kind of the primary arm that attaches to his shoulder joint here, which has got kind of like a cup on the inside of it. And then on the back of that arm, you also have another ball joint. So you can then take this part and then attach it to that part to make his arm. So you get a lot of flexibility in how you actually pose those arms together, which is really cool. So you can really get a lot of variety in your poses.
Yeah.
And how you might put them together. So we're going to go ahead and just attach these guys here.
All right. Crabbox asking, do you listen to anything while painting or have anything in the background?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, 100%.
Watch so many bad movies.
Yeah, typically it's like really, really crummy movies. Like old sci-fi movies are my favorite. I love those. Yeah, those are great. I like that a lot. If I'm trying to bone up on like some stuff from the Clone Wars, maybe I'll just put on like, season 4 or something like that.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to like, just familiarize myself with some characters that we might be referring to in the game or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
That sort of thing. But I usually find that like for painting, I like to get together with friends because you can just, while you're working on stuff, just as we are doing right now, you just kind of shoot the breeze and work on stuff, and it's it keeps you motivated to kind of keep working on stuff. So just having like regular hobby nights, like at your local game store or just at everybody's house, something like that, I think is really conducive to getting your stuff done.
Yeah.
And kind of like the momentum is it carries through with your friends.
I know at FFG there's a lot that people that paint over lunch and do a big like painting lunch.
Yeah,
totally. I tend to do the group painting and like watching stuff, listening to podcasts and whatnot for like for like 90% of a mini, and then when I have to like zoom in and try to do a face or eyes or like the final touches, I'll just put on some music so I can just like get, and I'll be totally alone. Like that's just me, but I like for the finishing touches, the last like 10%, I want to be just like completely absorbed and focused. But paint nights are great, certainly for assembly. For base coating, for almost everything, for me. And then some people can just do painting wherever. Like John could paint probably like on a crashing plane.
I have painted on an airplane before.
Really?
Mixed results.
That's ridiculous.
Mixed
That
results.
sounds insane.
Yeah. The worst part is that like I'm on the aisle and I've got all my little jars of paint out and everything, and and the dude against the window has to get up and go to the bathroom, and you can just tell he's kind of conflicted.
You see?
Yeah. There's actually a comedy bit I heard online not too long ago that covers exactly that, and I was like, oh, I was that guy with the paints out.
Oh Lord.
Weird dude. But it was for a deadline when I was traveling somewhere, and it was
wow.
and it was I was not doing precision work. Don't get me wrong. It was like very broad strokes, right? And how was it set up? All right, cool. So we've got these arms. I chose to kind of like splay them out like pretty wide, so he's got like maximum presence with this whole thing. So I'm going to set those guys down there. But the next thing I'm going to do, just to make sure that I can get those arms to go in there well with the cloak, is I'm going to attach the cloak. And I'm going to do that by applying some plastic glue here to the inner ridge of the cloak right here. I'm going to apply a little bit right here on the front part, and that's where it's going to connect to the torso. And then on his back, he's got a kind of a flat part on the back of his neck. I'm going to place a little bit there, and that's going to be the other connection point. So you want to make sure that when you connect these two parts, that it's going to sit pretty flat up against his torso as well as possible. And I can see now that in the pose that I chose, I kind of need to cant his torso a little bit forward. So again, the power of plastic glue, I'm going to kind of bend that guy ever so slightly forward to allow that thing to fit in there right.
That's so cool.
Cool. So the important part here is that you have like a good connection right here at the front of the torso, so it doesn't look like his cloak is like floating above him, and that at the back, so it can kind of like hold in there pretty well. So because we want this part to kind of like stay connected pretty well, I'm going to hold it for a little bit, kind of let it sit up a little bit in there. And then I'm going to go back in here, and I'm just going to apply just a very slight dab on the inside, just to kind of, give me a little bit extra contact. I don't really want to go too overboard with it, though, because the more you add, the longer it'll take to actually dry. So we've got that guy in there. We've got our cloak on that. We're going to kind of hold that guy in there. Then we're going to let that sit. Normally I would let that sit for, I don't know, maybe a couple minutes, something like that. But we're going to keep pressing forward.
All right.
So as we mentioned before, you've got these shoulder pads. You can see on this forearm configuration, you have like a small rectangular recess there where that shoulder pad would. But because we want maximum flexibility on the pose, we're going to take the pads off right now. And then I'm going to go ahead and attach one of the arms by applying a little bit of glue there. And then I'm going to kind of carefully slot this in underneath the arm or underneath the cloak and over top of that shoulder joint. Again, kind of using the flexibility of the whole thing, so it's set up. And then also just making sure that our join, and you might have to kind of use a couple of different fingers, kind of like how I'm doing, to kind of like hold it at multiple points of connection here. Making sure that that cloak kind of joins in there right, and that part holds in there. And you might have to just hold this for a second, just to have it like set up.
But yeah, another plastic glue advantage is that you can get your fingers all over it, because they're not gonna, like, if that was super glue,
I would
would be
my hands would be glued. I'd be like running in panic. It'd be insane.
They're asking, which character not currently announced would you most like to see in Legion?
Not currently announced. Ooh, that's a good question. You go first.
I want Emphas Nest.
Yeah,
that's so
Emphas
cool.
Nest would be super cool.
Costume rules.
That is very, very cool. I love Emphas Nest. That character's awesome.
For me, like, I know it's like totally outside of our eras, but Kylo Ren is so cool. And I love
Yeah.
Kylo
Ren is cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I know who it is. Lando. It's gotta be Lando.
Oh, yeah.
It's gotta be Lando.
I mean, he's overdue at this
Yeah,
point.
he is definitely overdue. All right. So I'm going to kind of adjust this guy a little bit. And this is going to be like a little bit of a process of back and forth just to get that thing to set just right, because it's a lot of points of connection, how we're having it all set up. So you might have to kind of adjust it as it dries. But right now, the important part is that my cloak is holding down there right firm against the torso still pretty well, and I can kind of adjust and tweak these guys as I see fit. You might find that you can use something to kind of prop this up against it. Like if you're really worried about it drying and drooping over time, you can just kind of like set your plastic glue bottle or something in there to kind of hold it firm as you go through and do it. But again, we're going to kind of press on just for the sake of getting this guy wrapped up.
Lots of people agreeing that they would love to see Emphas Nest.
Yeah.
It's just such a
Cloud
brilliant
Riders.
character
Such a cool
design.
look, and
It gets to that
get
sort
her
of
on her bike. And like,
the Cloud Gang, like grapnels, and I like anything that's gonna combine weird technology and like melee combat. Just the idea of having like fan shields on your hands. I'm just thinking from the perspective of like hobbying modeling opportunities. Like it'd be amazing to provide both retracted and fanned out parts. And I know for a fact that one of the things that sculpting is working on is just that extra level of customizability. I think you're going to start seeing more and more really cool configurations. So I think that this game is very rapidly becoming rife with hobby possibilities. And I'm really excited about that future, because like that's what got me into minis gaming in the first place is just the little toys themselves. So those are just getting cooler and cooler, and I couldn't be happier with the direction that that's heading. We're gonna obviously try to continue to be cognizant of time, labor, and ease of building. So I think that Grievous is kind of a high watermark in terms of complexity.
Yeah,
just because of the nature of that character, we're not going to start putting out 200-piece kits or anything like that. But I think we're going to be able to do some really, really cool stuff with a lot of the a lot of the future characters.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I feel like every day sculpting like makes another breakthrough and they figure out another way to do things.
They're killing it.
Yeah, they're doing a great job of like really figuring out how to leverage the material and just also the subject matter in really cool and interesting ways. So, yeah, very, very cool stuff. All right, so Grievous is kind of drying there a little bit. We've got his kind of arms set up in a way that we like. We might kind of adjust those a little bit as the glue dries, but I'm just going to go ahead and attach his head. So while he is drying, we can move on to some specifics on the bark speeder. I don't think that there's like a lot of stuff I need to really cover on the bark, but again, you have to kind of do it in a specific order, and there are a couple things if you want to allow the sidecar to swivel, as you see in the Clone Wars animated series. It's pretty cool. It can actually like flip around to the back side, and we designed it in such a way to allow that. So you have to kind of be a little careful in how you go through and do it. So I kind of like, maybe see. We'll see what chat says. Do you think head to the left, head to the right?
Head to the left, head to the right.
What do you think?
Some other option.
Some other option. Straight up?
Just he's like laughing at this guy. Coughing into his cloak.
I kind of like head to the left.
There's a delay, of course, so it'll take a little while.
Oh, sure. Well, we have some time.
Yeah,
we can go back to it.
Well, I finished this Rolly Droideka.
Yeah,
and
let's.
I think one of the important things to do when you have finished it, you got to test. You got to do the roll test.
Test the rollability.
Yeah.
Let's set up some battle droids and we can do a little bowling.
Little battle droid bowling here. Not bad.
Very
you
rolly.
so that's how you know.
That's how you know.
Very rolly.
I
You've
think this
done it.
survived. You may want to wait till it's fully dry.
Before you start just willy-nilly chucking it about.
Put this on the base. Such a cool design. Like I will say this about the Separatist army. They have so many super cool things. They're just neat.
Yeah, for sure.
I love the Separatists, the robots. That's my bag.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm in the process of assembling many battle droids right now.
Yeah. We've got one vote for left and one vote for down.
Down.
So,
Left and down.
yeah.
All right. Cool. I think that's pretty close to
That's
how he
pretty
is
close to
currently.
what it is, yeah.
Cool. So here is an assembled bark speeder. As I mentioned before, this miniature is kind of a combination of plastic and of hard plastic and PVC parts. So you have to use both kinds of glue, super glue and plastic cement or plastic glue together for it. But for the vehicle itself, you can use plastic, and I recommend that. But when it comes to actually attaching the peg to the base or the riders on either side, you have to use some super glue to do that.
As we're getting started with that, Glucose98 asks, any tips for modeling the shields of the droidekas?
Oh, in terms of like if you wanted to zhuzh your model up a little?
Yeah.
A little bit of clear plastic stuff. So there are a number of Christmas ornaments I've seen.
That's what I was going to say. I know
that
nothing
can
about this stuff.
often work. I think getting the right size to be able to go around and tape around to the bottom of the miniature is going to be a little challenging. I'm sure it will be solved within a few weeks of the release. Somebody will figure out, oh, here's where you go online to buy that thing.
Yeah.
And
Cut this apart and take this piece out and stain it blue.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
One cool idea I've seen is to not do the complete shield, but to just do like pieces where bolts are hit, like blaster fire is hitting.
Oh, I see.
And then it kind of tapers around a little bit.
Yeah, so you can maybe just do like chunks that you kind of mount on wire or to the mini in some way. So I've seen people playing around with that. I think there's a myriad of things that you could could do. It could even be in our interest to do some sort of premium product in the future.
Oh yeah.
So that's a possibility.
That would be cool.
But I'm really, really excited to see what people do in terms of cool conversions and army paint schemes and everything. That's always one of the most fun things for me when new units come out.
The clones especially.
The clones especially, clones and droids and all this cool stuff is going to be really interesting to see.
For sure.
As far as getting it on the base, someone was suggesting you could leave the arms off and then like tweezer them on like ship in a bottle style.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That would probably be tricky, but like if you got the chops to do that, like
you'd have to paint the guy, I guess, separately and everything too, and then put it in there. But yeah, because the arms are separate, and that is really the part that is going to prevent that dome from going over top. I can see that working.
Yeah.
You have to leave it off the base, and you're right. You have to kind of go in from the underside. But
there is there's a nice socket fit to those arms. They only go in a certain way, so that could actually be pretty viable.
Yeah.
Just leave a little
gap
there.
Cool. Okay,
right,
so
bark speeder.
bark speeder. So as we mentioned before, we've got got this guy. He has a hinge on the back that allows this guy to flip around to the back side. But you can't allow any glue to get into that hinge, and you have to kind of assemble it in a particular way. So I'm going to go over that in particular right now. So we've got the...
And these come just like that, right? They're not.
well, I did a little
frames.
sub-assembly stuff
Okay.
here ahead of time, just to kind of illustrate some points and just to make this a little bit quicker. But we're going to start with the main bark speeder section first. And the most key part here is you've got a top part and a bottom part. So this is the top. And I've already kind of assembled the top cover and the seat on there. And then the bottom part has got like a jet turbine intake here on the end. You have to make sure that this part is sandwiched in between this part before you glue the top on, otherwise you won't have these jet turbines, which are pretty integral to the design.
Yeah.
And these have some little parts that you insert under the inside. There's a little channel along the bottom that helps you align with them and get everything set up there. So yeah, you just want to test fit it first, make sure everything fits fine. It should be flush on the bottom, so these parts match up pretty well. When you're happy with the overall fit, put a little bit of plastic glue here along the bottom. Attach all this stuff. Go ahead and glue that guy down. He's got this extra little post here to help you align everything, get it all locked in there just right. And then this part is going to then attach to the bottom. Like that, and you got a bunch of posts and all that sort of thing set up. For a good join, I recommend that you go around the whole outer rim of the thing. And
Dramatic.
Yeah, exactly. The outer rim. Kind of apply all that. A little bit over here on the back side too. Put a little bit in the post holes.
So yeah, so you're hitting the rim of the
Yeah,
piece
just going
as well as the post.
Yeah, just go around the whole thing, and then sandwich these guys together. I think that because the plastic glue can kind of separate as it dries, you might want to think about, oh, you know what? I almost forgot a very key part, and that is you have these foot pedals. Before you glue the top to the bottom, and I almost forgot it, you have to take and insert these foot pedals into there so it will fit in there flush. So you'll see it on the bottom of this foot pedal section, you've got a little tab here on the bottom section, and this needs to slot inside here, and then it needs to rest flush with that little peg right there in between the hole. So that needs to go in there just like that, and it'll rest flat.
Sure.
And make sure that part is on there, because otherwise it will be hard to put in there because there's a little plate on this interior part that pushes all that stuff down. So we're going to apply a little bit of plastic glue here. Slot this fella in there. So that is your order of operations number 2 after putting that part on there first. Put that part on there. Now we've still got a little bit of this plastic glue around the whole thing. Now we can actually attach the top to the bottom and push all that stuff in there flat.
Nice.
So you might find that, you know, as I mentioned before, that you were, these parts might kind of separate over time. So you might want to think about taking a rubber band or even some tape or something like that to kind of hold this stuff secure as all this stuff dries, just to make sure you have a nice tight join across the whole thing. But we're going to go on to the sidecar, which is the next part. So I've assembled the 2 halves of the sidecar here. The next step that you have to do is you've got this hinge that attaches to the bark speeder, and you know there's a kind of L-shaped peg that goes onto the bottom of the bark, and then this part connects to this post on the very back. So you don't want to glue this on, you want to put this on here and just slot that over the top, and then this part can rotate, but you're going to put another part on top of this and also not put any glue over top of this to allow that to rotate. So the next part you have to do is you have to take the upper cover, which is right here, and this part is going to slot in right on top of that, and it's got a couple holes that go over top of those posts. Only put glue in the front one right here.
Yeah, so you're gluing that stationary peg.
Yeah,
not-
that stationary
not the
peg,
hinge.
not the other one. Yeah, not the hinge. You want to allow that to move. We're just going to push that down over top of it, and then while holding that, just make sure to kind of rotate that thing to make sure it has the proper range of motion that you need. That's what you need, like that. Then after that part is assembled, you then take the seat. That seat is going to go down over top of that part right there. So apply a little bit of glue here, a little bit along this side.
Such a cool miniature.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, if I do clones, I'm going to do a lot of these guys. But first, I have many battle droids to assemble and paint.
We had a question from Kravik about how do you guys feel about doing mounted commanders at some point, like Obi-Wan on a Varactyl, Jar Jar Binks on his little K2 or whatever they're called.
Yeah. Han on a tauntaun. Yeah, that would be sweet.
It's a cool idea, for sure.
Well, yeah, we mentioned Emphas Nest before. I mentioned we'd probably want to put her on her speeder bike. That would be very cool.
It'd be kind of fun to have a mechanic for mounting, dismounting, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think we'd want to. I think we would, if we were going to go to the trouble to model that, I think we would want to have some gameplay mechanics as well. I think that's pretty cool. You kind of have that to some extent with the ability for like the land speeder to ferry a character around. Mounts could have that potential as well. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff to play with there. I'm always happy when the miniatures kind of inform some cool new gameplay ideas.
Yeah, totally.
I axed it for complexity reasons, but at one point in early Legion design, I had Imperial speeder bike guys that could get off.
Oh, sure.
Scout troopers and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
there's always the possibility for that. It's always sort of a fine balance between, how much simplicity do you sacrifice for the sake of like verisimilitude.
Right.
And I tend towards the philosophy of keeping a game simple. But if there's a strong, compelling reason to do something and it matches up with the way that something is modeled, I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Like Enfys, certainly, I think there'd be an opportunity for like getting off the speeder and getting into combat or something like that. So,
Yeah.
because especially since you see that in the film. So yeah, it's just fun stuff. It's gonna rattle around in my head. Maybe it'll come out in the game at some point.
Okay, so the last part after you assemble and put the seat on there, and then you've got these side brackets that go on either side, and these side brackets fit over top of this post right here and into a slot. So they're kind of aligned for each side, so I'm going to grab the correct one here, and it's just going to go over top like that and kind of lock that seat in.
Sure.
So again, kind of order of operations, you got to put the seat on before you do this, you got to put that thing on before that thing, and the other, So
All the dominoes have to go in
all
order.
the dominoes, right. So put these guys on here, slot that guy in. These guys on here. Cool. All right, so we've got that basic seat section finished, and then you've got a front section that you have to put on, and there's one particular alignment issue that I want to make sure to cover with that.
Sure.
So you've got these foot pedals, and the foot pedals have to align with the feet of the miniature here, so they have to be angled in the right way. So if you put them in the wrong way, his feet won't rest flush onto the pedals themselves.
Sure.
So you just want to make sure that figure out which is the front of the sidecar, and you can tell that by you have this little channel at the top, and that's where the weapon is going to rest. So on this end down here at the bottom is the actual front part. So you got that part properly aligned. It's going to slot into this thing and connect there like that. So we want to connect these pedals onto there and just make sure to angle these so that the feet will go in there correctly. So that would be the wrong way to do it. His feet won't rest in there right, but you can flip them around this way. That's how you do it right there. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of glue in here.
Now, are those slotted in so that as long as they are oriented correctly, they're going to be at the proper angle?
Yeah.
That's nice. You don't have to test fit with the
Yeah.
figs or anything like that. They're just going to lock into place in the right position.
Yeah, they're definitely seated right. However, I will say that because this part is now then going to glue to the front part, you have to make sure this connection point here is going to connect right here to the front. You want to make sure that that part is properly aligned. I don't have an extra crew guy here, but
I can dig one out of this here. Poor Seb.
well, I think I might have already taken it for that guy. I'm not sure if we have it. I know.
Shall see.
I know. We're waiting on getting some more of those guys in ourselves. So what I suggest doing is go ahead
Cupboard is bare.
and take the mini, put them in down here in the seat, kind of rest them in the seat, and make sure that when you attach this part to this part, that his feet properly align.
Sure.
So also because this alignment is kind of crucial, I actually will use super glue to connect this part to the other. After I've gotten the feet in there, I'll take a little bit of super and put a dab here on the front of this part because it will just dry that much faster and we'll have no play in it at all, so it'll just connect that much quicker. Just remove a little bit of the excess here.
Advanced super glue techniques.
Yeah, use your clippers on the top. Just
Yeah.
to make sure to not get a whole lot of super glue in your clippers. Okay, so that little dab there will do you. Okay. And then we'll just go ahead and attach this part. And hold that for a few seconds to get it to be aligned right. And you can kind of tell just looking at the panel lines, just making sure they're all parallel with one another to get the proper alignment. But I do suggest dropping the driver or the gunner into the seat to make sure that his feet fit properly. Okay, I'll let that fellow dry for a sec. All right. This kind of shows how the plastic glues kind of separate a little bit. So again, finding something to kind of separate or kind of hold that together would be very beneficial for you. So I do recommend that. Little rubber bands or just masking tape.
Clamps and stuff.
Yeah, you can get little clamper guys, like an alligator clip or whatever.
Clips, yeah, I was just gonna say,
that would probably work.
If they have like the rubber tip.
Yeah, that'll totally work. But yeah, I think that'll help you out while you're kind of setting things aside to dry and working with other stuff, especially when you're doing these two kind of halves. You don't want it to dry or come down in the morning or something and notice that your setup is a little askew.
Yeah. So do you have any kind of tips for someone who's like, I glued this together the wrong way, and now it's like, like the pedals are now facing the wrong way? Like, are there any kind of like general tips for how to salvage your miniature?
It's kind of tough. I mean, they make some solvents that can remove the glue, but a lot of times it'll damage the plastic when you use it.
Sure.
So you might have to just be really selective and careful and actually remove the part with a hobby knife and kind of cut it in there. I always recommend it's really important to just test fit your stuff. Make sure that before you apply any sort of glue or anything to anything, that you're just making sure that you are you're using the right parts and the right orientation to get them to fit together properly. And then, if you are working with plastic glue, you do have working time, a little bit of forgiveness. But if you let it sit for too long, it'll start to really kind of melt those two parts together. And when you go to pull them apart, it'll start to stretch it like taffy and gets a little wonky. So you have to be kind of careful with that too.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say sometimes the best thing is to actually make a clean cut. If you've got something on backwards or something like that, make a clean cut, and then reapply, and then you can do some filing and maybe a green stuff work to correct it.
Sure.
But rather than try to rip it apart.
Right.
So it really depends. One thing that you can use to kind of save yourself is something called a pin vise. It's basically just a tiny little drill. You can drill little holes, and you can use paper clips or wire to create a strong connection if you have to disassemble something.
Sure.
That can be used to connect very tiny parts that you may have mangled. There are ways to go in and sort of address things surgically, but John's saying, it's always better to do it right the first time. It's worth taking the extra time to do it because it's a lot harder to undo something than it is to do it correctly in the first place. But there is hope if you're sitting there with some misassembled models. Wiggling for super glue, if you just sort of slowly, deliberately wiggle stuff back and forth, it'll eventually crack. And sometimes you can separate it. Plastic glue is very permanent.
Yeah. So it'll pretty much lock those parts in. You might have to kind of cut them apart surgically to get them to go together properly.
So we're almost done with this guy.
Yeah, we are. We don't have a whole lot left to really discuss at this point. So the next part here is if you want to attach your sidecar, you want to make sure to take this V-shaped bracket here. On the top, there are a couple little pegs that need to slot into the two holes here on the bottom. So it's going to slide very closely here to where the footrests are, and it's going to slot right in there. So I'm going to make sure to test fit that, make sure it fits in there right. It looks legit. Cool. So a little bit of plastic glue into those holes. So attach that bit. And this will be the support that will allow that part to connect. Okay. Cool. So it looks pretty flat. That's kind of where we want it to be. And then this sidecar itself, you've just got this one little part here that mounts here onto the back. So test fit that part. Slide that thing in. It's kind of a tight fit, so you might need to trim it a little bit. And then you just want to make sure that this part can align with that. So you've got this slot here on the interior of the sidecar. It slots in right there with that part.
Sure.
So as you push that thing closed, it should rest in there flush.
But you're not gluing that, obviously.
No, you don't want to glue, unless you don't want it to rotate.
Sure.
If you're cool with that, then you can ignore that whole bit about the hinge and all that sort of stuff ahead of time. But yeah, you just want to kind of slot that guy in there like that. When you're cool with it, you might also want to keep this part separate for easier painting, especially if you're not going to allow it to rotate like that. You'll find that getting in there to paint this sort of stuff on the inside of these might be a little bit difficult. So you might want to just leave this whole section separate here at the bottom.
Definitely. And so is the entire bark speeder hard plastic?
Yeah, with the
Everything
exception
but the riders.
Except,
Right,
yeah, except for the
the
crew.
two riders
Yeah,
are-
the two
are
crew that
soft
attach on there.
plastic. Yeah.
are,
And what about these handlebars? Are those?
That's part of the rider
That's part
itself.
of the right. That's soft as well.
Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm kind of happy with the fit of everything. So a little bit of plastic glue into there. I'm gonna slot that fella in there. Slide that thing closed.
Thomas says, "Def like the direction y'all are going with these minis."
Cool.
So-
Yeah.
we're
we
trying
do
to-
too.
I'm super thrilled, and we're still trying to keep things accessible. But I really just think you get better minis when you've got
You do.
this
Oh, yeah.
hard plastic.
Yeah, for sure.
As good as our PVC is, it's still PVC.
Absolutely.
Cool. So that
There we have it.
Yeah, that is that part. I mean, you've got some extra panels and things to attach. Again, we've kind of like keyed in with these panels here on the sides that you've got specific ones that fit together. So you've got this part that fits into that part. So on and so forth as you go through and assemble it. The last little bit to probably talk about is when it comes to the peg that attaches the base.
Yeah.
Let me see if I've got that guy handy here.
There's
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
that one.
Yep. So you've got this guy here, and if you slot this into the bottom, you can kind of push it in there, and as you turn it, you'll eventually kind of hit a point where it can sink a little bit deeper, like that. And then you want to do that before you actually glue it onto the base. You want to take this peg, kind of slot it in there, turn it until it can actually rest in there, kind of smoothly, and then take the whole the bark plus the peg over top of your base, get it on so you've got the notches at the front and the back as always. And then once you have that point kind of marked on there, put a little dab of super glue onto the base, attach the peg to the base, and aside from the crew, which we would probably paint separately anyway, this bark speeder is pretty much done.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. So I think that
awesome.
pretty much covers everything. I
Yeah.
think,
So we've gone
got-
through like
Grievous.
pretty much everything that comes on frames
Yeah, most definitely.
in the Clone Wars core set.
Going to make some slight adjustments to Grievous's pose here a little bit. Maybe kind of brace him up against something so he'll dry properly. In the right kind of pose that we want.
Tighten them up. Yeah.
Looks nice and aggressive.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John, for coming on.
of course.
And,
Yeah, I
and
love it.
Alex as well for walking us through kind of how this works. And so like we said, there is that resource that's going to be going up in the near future here in the next week or so.
Very
Yeah.
detailed.
We're just kind of going through some last minute passes on some of the language and stuff and just kind of tightening it up a little bit and getting everything ready. But yeah, hopefully this will provide a good guide to you to get your battle droids and bark speeder onto the table in record time.
Absolutely.
I have one last droidica tip for the for the ball
Yeah,
form.
let's hear it.
Hold off on gluing this top bit, and then glue these little panels on last. Because if you glue them on first, they're going to be in the way the whole time, and you're going